Welcome back from that break. It's still Business Daily here on Trust TV. Now we're going to another conversation. It's talking about the World Bank's recent report that was just released, and it's been titled "Building Momentum for Inclusive Growth." And in that report, a few things have been said. But let me introduce my guest into the program who will join us now, Dr. Emmanuel Bashayi. He's joining us to further discuss and analyze this report by the World Bank. Thank you for joining us this morning on Business Daily.
The pleasure is all mine, Chiamaka. Thank you for having me.
All right, so I'm just going to do a quick run over on some of the highlights of that report. Now, the World Bank May 2025 Nigeria Development Update titled Building Momentum for Inclusive Growth paints a cautiously optimistic picture of Nigeria's economic trajectory. If you can see, if you're on your screen, is showing you there. Now, it highlights the country's strongest growth performance in a decade, underpinned by difficult but necessary reforms. However, it also flags persistent governance and revenue management issues, particularly the partial remittance of fuel subsidy savings by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. Now, according to this report, Nigeria recorded a 4.6 year-on-year GDP growth in Q4 of 2024, the fastest in over 10 years. This growth was largely driven by fuel subsidy removal, electricity tariff adjustments, exchange rate unification, and devaluation. Revenue performance, gross revenues from major government agencies, FIRS, NCS, NUPRC, and NNPCL rose from 16.5 trillion naira in 2023 to 29.5 trillion naira in 2024, a 78% increment. Now, improved fiscal deficit due to stronger revenue. There's so much. But let me speak to my guests. You've gone through that report, Dr. Bashayi. What's your take?
A very detailed report and very robust, of course. And then sometimes while you commend the effort of the writers of that report, especially when they compare it to October of 2024, which was the last time the report was released, you'll see that there's some significant improvements across the indices that were being evaluated and all. So, there were necessary reforms that needed to happen, although some of us had concerns with the way and manner in which they happened.
Yeah.
But then there are definitely positives as to how these reforms will take shape as the years go by, especially when they are in a sustained trajectory. Notable of them are the fuel subsidy removal, of course, the FX floating, and then the electricity tariff. This like a three-pronged approach, like a three-pronged onslaught on the economy, that it takes a very resilient economy to have withstood the shocks that those policies dealt with on the economy. And I will just brush through them very, very briefly. Fuel subsidy removal. Fuel subsidy removal in itself wasn't a big problem, so to say, even though we advocated that many advanced economies of the world have some levels of energy subsidy. So while there were accusations of various levels of corruption within the fuel subsidy regime, I would have expected that we don't throw the baby with the bathwater, that we have a concerted effort at dealing with the corruption, and then we systematically move away from that regime, rather than just throwing the whole nation into the situation that we put the nation at all. The other policy that aggravated the situation with the fuel subsidy removal was the FX floating, right? So it was like a double whammy effect on the economy, because petroleum transactions are typically done in USD, in dollars. So when you tinker with the exchange rate, it hits directly on the price of the pump price of petrol. So the price of petrol went up, not just because of the fuel subsidy removal, but also because of the policy on the FX, right? So all of this had their own different ripple effects across the entire economy value chain. And you and I are in Nigeria, so we saw how that impacted. So we're happy to look more deeper into the other elements, but then this, in the total view, is what these policy frameworks have dealt with on us as we went, as the policies were implemented. I mean, power tariffs, it's a different kettle of fish entirely. I mean, production costs went up the roof, and manufacturers have been crying foul. No, the alternatives are not directly very cheap compared to the grid electricity and all. But then, I mean, think about the simple one: hoteliers, right? If a hotel was charging, say, 20,000 naira per room per night, those tariffs went as far as 46,000 naira. And the only difference was because of the tariff that they are now having to pay. Hotel told me that they were paying 2 million naira per annum for electricity. They suddenly started paying 11 million. So what do you expect will happen to the rates of their rooms? So this is the reality that we face. Will you say they are completely wrong? We can look into the details of those, and then we'll see the merits and the demerits in them. But then most importantly is to understand that they came with a lot of impact on the economy, and that's very critical to note.
All right, let's look at one of the key highlights of that report, and that's the fact that the NNPCL is not remitting the full amount from the full subsidy savings. The question mostly, well, I'm sure most Nigerians will be wanting to know is, why is that so? And what is the money that is not being remitted used for? Do you have any insights to that?
So the thing is, that brings to question the level of transparency in our oil corporation, right? Where Nigerians, especially at the average Nigerian, will expect a deeper level of transparency, especially in the way and manner in which these dealings are done. Just remember that the Nigerian has taken the bullet for the removal of the fuel subsidy.
Yeah.
And whatever happens afterwards, the Nigerian has a story to tell at the pump. So the authorities and the government of the day have a duty to ensure that for the sacrifice that Nigerians have made, it should be worth something. We need to dig deeper to understand why, because the subsidy is gone. So why are we not seeing the remittances of the savings that are coming from the subsidy? And then we see them in terms of the visible impact that it can be made for the average Nigerian on the ground to understand. So this is where the executive power comes in, where somebody needs to be called to account. Somebody needs to ask the question. Someone needs to give answers. Why are we having this? And trust me, the sacrifice that Nigerians have had to pay, it's huge. For it to be swept under the carpet and made to look like just one of those regular things that we do again. So it calls to question the integrity of the oil corporation. It calls to question the integrity of the leadership of those, and who are those that are behind it. Everybody should be called out, and then the right questions should be asked by the authorities. But then one thing that is clear is that Nigerians have already made the sacrifice. We paid the price already. So we should see the benefits.
All right, now, so let's go back to these reforms. I'm sure you're well aware that in a few 14 days from now, we'll be looking at 2 years in office of our president. Now, not to preempt anything before that conversation, but so far, these are the reforms we're going to be saying this has been done from 2023 till now. And as you know, some of them were mentioned exactly on that day, May 29, 2023, the full subsidy removal, the floating of the FX, all these were mentioned. So far, can you tell us, in the last 2 years or so, what these reforms, how have they really impacted the economy? The World Bank has said their own thing, oh yes, you guys are doing well enough. But on the ground level, in reality, how has this really impacted us as a nation?
Very good question, Chiamaka. So you see, it's good to have the fancy economic terms and all the fancy economic talks, right? But one thing is very clear: on the ground is where the deal is. And I try to keep things as simple as possible. We can go into the whole academic discussion of all the terms and all the define jargons. But this is the reality on the ground. The average Nigerian will ask the question, is my life now better than it was 2 years ago? That's the question on the streets. And all these policies culminate into this one question, into answering this one question. Is it better for me now than it was 2 years ago? If the answer is no, which is the answer, because Nigerians are not better than they were 2 years ago. So while we have all the economic projections and all the economic analysis pointing that, oh, this is good, this is great, the Nigerian is saying, I'm suffering more than I was. Do you know that an average mama put now by the street corner, you cannot eat a decent meal for less than 1,000 naira now? 2 years ago, with 250 naira, you can have some decent apple and some vegetable, bitter leaf soup, or some little egusi and okra soup mixed together with 1 or 2 pieces of meat. But today, you need 4 times that amount. And the question is, the concern of the Nigerian is, my income hasn't multiplied, gone up by 4 times, but I'm spending 4 times more. When you go to transportation, the story is no different. When you go to healthcare, the story is no different. Housing, the story is no different. So the average Nigerian has been impacted on every side. So it is nice to hear that, oh, we should stay the course, and the Nigerian on the street is asking, you want me to continue like this? You want to stay on course like this for another 10 years for it to stabilize the economy? Now, you have the burden of doing the economics discussion, the econometrics, the macro and microeconomic climate analysis and all. The Nigerian is only looking at what's on the table. And while we're trying to get the whole fancy economic things going, we need to be conscious about what is on the ground. 2 years ago, if I give you 5,000 naira, it's a lot of money. Today, 5,000 naira is nothing. That is where we have come to. Inflation has gone off the roof. The cost of commodities have gone up. The Nigerian is saying, I am not better off than I was 2 years ago. And this is the question on the lips of Nigerians. So while we have the time to read the different pages of the NDU, the Nigerian doesn't have time to read that. It doesn't consequentially mean anything significant to him. The only thing is, I used to be like this, I am like this now, life is better for me, I'm happy, the government is working. That's the Nigerian's definition of government working.
All right, so now you said something, inflation, and earlier in our top stories, we see that the House of Reps is speaking to the CBN. This is, of course, varying off our conversation, but let's talk about it because it's coming up on Monday. The MPC is going to meet again. What are we expecting? Because the reps have told them, I don't know what you intend to do, but don't hike up anything that might create more problems for us. So what should you take as a business analyst? What should we expect? And what do you think that should be the the take from that MPC meeting that will take place on Monday?
As a Nigerian, if I was to advise the MPC, I would say, hey, let's strive for stability rather than aggravating the situation. Now, there is a basis for which we kept increasing the MPR, right? Thankfully, the last MPC, they kept the rate constant, right? Now, the basis for which that argument was proposed was that when you have inflation, a huge inflationary trend, you keep the MPR high, you keep jacking it up until you reach a certain level of equilibrium where you're able to tame inflation. Now, that is nice. Within the books, very, very reasonable thing to do. Now, but with the reality of Nigeria, this is what it means. MPR means higher cost of credit for businesses, higher cost of funds. Now, when the cost of funds go high, it goes back directly into the cost of goods and services, and that then increases inflation. All right. Now, the thing I have kept saying is that our inflationary trend is not just premised on monetary policy. I know the CBN is responsible for monetary policy and all. They have to use what is at their disposal. But our inflation is majorly driven by fiscal policies. That's the truth. Fiscal policies like energy costs, fiscal policies like transportation costs, fiscal policies like security. The farmers can't go to the farm. So the few farmers that are going to the farm, they produce less food than what is required for all of us. So the little supply that comes in, the price goes up. So if we tame security, we make sure more farmers are able to go to the farms. If we're able to keep energy costs as low as possible, it takes, I mean, a few weeks ago, I was in Jos. I was asking for the price of the movement of a J5 load of tomatoes from Jos to Port Harcourt. It's 850,000 naira. So a basket of tomato that could be, say, 10,000 naira in Jos will end up landing in Port Harcourt at 35,000 naira. Because 850,000 naira goes into the transportation of a J5 load, right? So transportation is a big deal. And apart from the fact that we have just the transportation cost in terms of the cost of fuel, the different roadblocks and the different checkpoints where they have to pay for produce, pay for this and all, has impacted on the cost of the. So CBN will use the tools at their disposal, the MPR, the MPC meeting to take a decision. But trust me, our inflation is not just driven by monetary policy. It's not just a monetary inflation. It has a very huge fiscal leg to it. And we need to look into that.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Bashayi. It's always a pleasure to have you on the program, giving your insights on the discuss. Well, we have to wrap this up right now because the news is coming up in a few minutes. Thank you for joining us on the program this morning.
The pleasure is all mine. I appreciate you coming.
And that's the much we have for you this morning on Business Daily. We've discussed the Meta finds its impact on the Nigerian economy and MSMEs, who are mostly the major users. And of course, we analyzed the recent World Bank report on Nigeria. Same time, same place tomorrow. And my name is Chiamaka Nwafor. Bye for now.